With raised consciousness and a determination to expose injustice, early childhood teachers can begin to create a more equitable society by teaching its youngest members to be advocates for justice. My name is Lindsay Stuart, and welcome to my presentation on teaching for social justice and why it's a necessary component of early childhood classrooms. There is no debate that our world is rapidly becoming smaller with the rise of globalization. In fact, authors LoBianca, Lydia Coate, and Crozet suggest that we are in the midst of the greatest movement of populations of any time. In Regina alone, it is projected that by 2030, 1/3 of our population will be made up of immigrants, compared to 11% today. In the past, we rested easy as a sovereign entity, but now we must adapt to this rise in migration and the need to work beyond our borders. According to Pennycook and McConey, classrooms have traditionally been places which are inevitably cultural and political sites, with teachers always promoting covert or overt cultural and ideological agendas. However, it is these discourses which need to be interrupted rather than perpetuated. The purpose of this presentation is threefold. First, to look at what social justice actually is. Secondly, to discuss why we should be concerned with social justice. And finally, why it is imperative to begin teaching with a social justice focus in early childhood classroom. So let's take a look at what social justice is. Social justice is really problematic to define. From person to person, definitions can vary based on a variety of factors, like political philosophy, social philosophy, religious beliefs, or political affiliations. In fact, I think if you ask someone subscribing to a postmodernist view about social justice, he or she would probably say the term is nothing but a fantasy. However, if we come up with a working term, teaching in this manner goes way beyond basic school practices and includes instruction specifically designed to help students consider some causes of and solutions for persistent social, economic, and political inequities. Ultimately, it encourages collective action against such inequities. You may be wondering why we should be concerned about social justice right now. Ideologically speaking, schools are supposed to be places to offer equal opportunity for those who enter and are willing to work hard. In theory, many people would argue that they want everyone to have equal schooling experiences with access to similar teachers and materials. The idea is that by making everything equal, they will also be equitable. However, this is not the case. The author Walensky claims that education and curriculum are explicit tools of European imperialism and colonialism. Instead of providing the building blocks for social, political, and economic mobility, education is a vehicle for maintaining the status quo. Schools are instruments through which colonial discourses have operated and are continuing to operate. The hidden and traditional curriculum teaches the social, political, and economic values of the colonized nation. As knowledge is socially and culturally intertwined, it can best be described as problematic because it is constructed to serve the needs and interests of particular groups of people. As stated previously, with a rise in globalization and migration, schools are facing an influx of students with culturally and linguistically diverse sets of language and knowledge. Schurman writes, education is at an important historical and political juncture, and I couldn't agree more with her. Teachers cannot escape the politics of education, as they're the ones who negotiate between society's curriculum and the students in their care. As such, teachers can either offer an uncritical, neutral education that supports the status quo, or choose to empower students to question dominant idea, notes author Christopher Merritt. As identity formation is socially constructed within an environment, schools and schooling have a strong impact on how a child comes to see the world. If issues of power are not addressed, feelings of negative self-perception and marginalization can develop. Further, according to the authors Shields and Mohan, if we do not create a more equitable playing field, students whose home backgrounds do not mirror the predominantly middle-class values and practices on which schools are organized will have less opportunity to succeed than their peers. Teaching about diversity and tolerance is not sufficient. It isn't enough to learn to accept others. Students need to learn how to treat others with respect and fairness, and if necessary, take on the responsibility to actively change a situation which endangers the pursuit of equity and equality for all. Therefore, in order to ensure a quality education program for all children, teaching and learning must be rooted in social justice. So I hope you are now thinking that social justice is something teachers should be concerned about. With this on your mind, I'd like to move on to talk about why we should begin these discussions in early childhood classrooms. From very young ages, children begin to internalize direct and indirect messages from their environment. They are very adept at reading spoken and unspoken values of society, family, and school. In fact, this is how they learn. Since children are forming ideas about fairness and their own sense of identity, as well as internalizing messages about power and privilege, the early childhood classroom is the ideal place to begin discussions with a critical social justice focus. And as early childhood classrooms are no exceptions to the workings of inequity or privilege, critical reflection should begin in students' first schooling experiences. There are many myths that adults succumb to when considering young children. Let's debunk a few of the most common ones. Contrary to popular belief, children are very aware of these ideas. Young children notice everything, but their observations are not accompanied by value judgments. This happens later, which is why teaching tolerance must start young and occur often. If children are presented with opportunities to learn encompassing a critical social justice focus, allowing them to discuss and to understand diversity, they are less likely to internalize unspoken negative messages about difference. If we wait for children to become ready to learn about difficult concepts, too often it's already too late. As early childhood educators are not as tightly constrained by prescribed curriculum, they are uniquely positioned to engage in culturally relevant pedagogy. Dewey talks about experiences rooted in everyday make the most meaningful curriculum, while Freer extends this notion, indicating that curriculum should be organized to bring change in terms of the present political and social situations in which disadvantaged individuals find themselves. Since ECE classrooms offer flexibility, curriculum based on these theories allow for children to intentionally be introduced to the notions of fairness and unfairness and taught how to think critically and take action before discourses of power are ingrained. Now it's time to bring it all together. According to Schurman, the current context of education is characterized not only by the increasing diversity of students, but also by the reality that only a few of these students will receive a high-quality early childhood education. Taking this into consideration, it is imperative early childhood educators develop practices which address the injustices affecting so many students within schools. In diverse classrooms, the heart of educational endeavors must include an examination of inequality and inequity. Critical pedagogy can be a means for you to help your students reflect on and to discover social justice issues that exist in their communities and in the world. Through this work, children can begin to see themselves as change agents who can impact the marginalization or privileging of certain identities. And bringing it full circle, with raised consciousness and a determination to expose injustice, early childhood teachers can begin to create a more equitable society by teaching its youngest members to be advocates for justice. Thank you for coming to my presentation.